Hello dear chess friends, this is MVP and this is the first chapter of my international chess course about the Caro-Kann defense, and this chapter is about the exchange variation. e4, c6, d4, d5, e takes d5, c takes d5. And of course here white has the possibility knight f3, but it isn't a good move because black can develop the bishop on g4 and have a slight advantage, like in Queen's Gambit with exchanged colors. After knight c6, white has possibility bishop b5, bishop g4, and bishop d3, bishop g4, c3 e6, castle kingside, bishop d6, and of course black has a slight advantage due to the standard plan of knight g8 to e7, then to g6, castles, f6, e5, and so on. So the better possibility for white is bishop d3, knight c6, and c3. This is the main position of the chapter, and black often plays knight f6, and this is a mistake, because white has the possibility to develop the bishop on f4. So the best continuation for black is queen c7, and now white has a lot of possibilities. The main of them are variation A, bishop g5, variation B, h3, and the most popular move for variation C, knight to e2. But let's check the other possibilities for now. Let's start with f4. This is a bad move because now the square e4 is very weak. So the main move for black is knight h6. Of course, if black will exchange their light squared bishops, they will have a slight advantage due to the better pawn structure. Let's say knight f3, bishop f5, castle kingside, e6, knight e5, bishop d6, queen e2, castle kingside. Sometimes white can play g4, but it is not good because bishop d3, knight d3, rook e8, and black completed their development and want to play f6, e5 with advantage, or something like queen g2, king h8, knight d2, knight g8, and knight goes to e4 with advantage for black. No, so white can also play bishop b3, but rook a8 with the idea f6, and then b takes c5. Black, of course, has fantastic position due to good control of white light squares. The other possibility for white is knight f3, but of course bishop g4, and as we said, black is already slightly better. Once in Montenegro team champion, my opponent played queen b3, but it is a big mistake due to knight takes d4, queen takes d5, e5, and black, of course, had a big advantage, and they won an easy game against FIDE Master. But it is a big mistake, of course. I think that the most interesting sideline is knight d2. Black, of course, plays knight f6, and they want to develop the bishop on g4. No, so white has the possibility of knight gf3, but of course bishop g4, castle kingside e6, and black has already slightly better position. For example, rook e1, bishop d6, knight f1. If h3, then bishop h5, and nothing changes. Castle king side. White can play, of course, knight g3, rook f8, but it is now a mistake to play h3 due to bishop f3, queen takes f3, and the move e5 gives black a big advantage because they had a late development. So slightly better move is bishop g5, but knight d7, bishop h4. White wants to bring the bishop on g3, and black is bringing the bishop to g6. Bishop h5, of course, bishop h7 is impossible due to king h7, knight g5, and king h6, and black has a decisive advantage. So bishop g3, bishop g6, exchange on g6, bishop d6, queen d6, knight g3, b5, a3, a5, and black are doing their standard minority attack and had a slight advantage. So h3 is slightly better move because now black can't develop their bishop on g4, but they have another idea. It's e5 because they had now a slight lead in development. D takes e5, knight takes e5, bishop c2, bishop c5, knight p3. It is a game of Efim Geller against Razovayev that was played in 1979, and there black could play slightly better. Bishop d6. They forced white knight to come to b3. It stands not so great, and black can easily equalize. For example, knight d4, bishop d7, knight gf3, castles, knight e5, knight e5, bishop e5, castles h6. Of course, this move is very good, and white has no possibility queen d3, bishop g5 anymore. The game can continue like queen d3, rook f8, bishop e3, a6, and the position looks like from Tarrasch variation of the French, it is equal because black has d5 pawn, but it gives also squares like e4 and c4, and so the position is something like equal. So let's move to the variation A, bishop g5. It looks like black now can play knight f6 because the pawns would be doubled, but they play knight f6 anyway. The reason is that bishop f6, g takes f6, queen f3 is not good due to the move e5, and black has better development and give up the pawn on f6, but it is very risky to take one of the pawns, like queen takes d5, bishop e6, queen f3, castle queen side, and white hasn't finished their development, and black has good chances on attack. The other possibility is queen takes f6, but rook g8, and unfortunately for white they can't play d takes e5 due to queen b6, and the b pawn is hanging, and white can defend them. For example, knight d2, bishop e7, queen f3, queen takes b2, rook b1, queen takes c3, bishop takes h7, queen takes a5, knight e2, rook g7, and due to bishop advantage, pair of bishop, black has completely better position. The other possibility for white is g3 to defend the pawn on g2, but black has little tactics. Knight takes d4. Of course, c takes d4 loses due to queen c1, king e2, queen takes b2, so white has to play knight d2, but knight c6, black has the pair of bishops and strong center, d5, f5, so they have big advantage. Slightly better move is h3, but nothing wrong with it. h6, bishop e3, and we already know that in such positions black can play e5 in one move. D takes a5, knight takes a5, knight f3, knight d3, queen takes d3, bishop d6, and position is about equal. So the main white's possibility is knight d2, bishop g4, knight h f3 e6, and once again black are not afraid of exchange on f6 because the g line would be useful for their attack. In Vishy Anand's game, his opponent played bishop h4, bishop d6, bishop g3, bishop h5, exchange on g6, castles, rook e1, rook a b8, and the white player made a good move, a4, because otherwise black can start their standard minority attack, queen c7, queen b1, a6, knight e5, rook f e8, h3, and here is the important moment. Black was waiting for the h3 move, and now white cannot play rook e3, rook h3, because the square h3 is the pawn is on h3. So the black could play, and they played bishop g6, a very strong move, and they have completely solved their opening problems. Bishop g6, h takes g6, Ilescas Cordoba against Anand, Linares 1994. Black has won this game. The alternative is the move for castles, bishop d6 and queen c2 with the idea of rook e1. The other possibilities h3, bishop h5, rook e1, and white pawn is already on h3, so the move bishop g6 is very good. For example, knight f1, bishop d3, queen takes d3, knight takes f4 with complete equality. So queen c2, h6, bishop is h5, of course, is also possible. Bishop h4, but in such position black has one more idea. It is a move knight h5, and black exchange their knight on white light squared bishop, rook f e1, knight f4, bishop g3, knight takes d3, queen takes d3, bishop g3, h takes g3, castle kingside with complete equality. So let's move to the variation b, 6h3. It is maybe the most dangerous move for black. Now the black's idea of knight f6 and bishop g4 obviously doesn't work, so they need to change their plan. Knight f6, of course, black has to develop the knight, and now knight e2 is a mistake due to e5, d takes e5, knight takes e5, bishop f4, bishop d6, bishop e5, bishop e5, knight d2, castles, castles, bishop h2, king h1, bishop d6, knight d4, a6, and due to pair of bishops, I think that black has slight advantage. So white has to play knight f3, and here comes another black's idea. It is g6, and black want to change the bishop on f5. White can try to prevent it by playing queen c2, but black has an option that we have already seen, knight h5, castles, knight f4, and they are exchanging one of white's bishop on the knight and have an equal game. The other possibility for white is bishop g5, and here already I think that it's time for good novelty, knight e4, and white has to move bishop e3, and then again black can play bishop f5 and made an exchange of the bishop without spoiling the pawn structure. Queen c2, knight d6, bishop f4, bishop takes d3, queen takes d3, bishop g7, knight a3, queen d7, and this position is about equal. So the main possibility for white is castle king side, bishop f5, and here the solid continuation for white is rook e1, bishop d3, queen takes d3, bishop g7, and the position is equal, like in the game Ruslan Ponomarev against Lech Van Lem, Dortmund 2010. Bishop f5 is more double-edged continuation. G takes f5, and here, of course, white has a lot of possibilities, actually two, and many grandmaster played here c4. White want to use the fact that black hasn't completed their development, and so white are trying to open the position. Bishop g7, knight c3, like it was played in the game Yefimenko against Ryazantsev in Russia 2011. Of course, c5 is too early due to b6, but after knight c3, the move c5 is the white's idea, so the right continuation for black was the move d takes c4, and of course white has to play queen a4, or otherwise they will have no pawn. Now black has two possibilities, but they come to one exact position: rook d8, queen c4 e6, or a6, queen takes c4, rook d8. The white's only good idea is rook d1 in this position, because otherwise they would play with the isolated d4 pawn, and now they want to play d5, but of course black can prevent them with playing knight d5 themselves. Bishop g5, rook d7, and of course black has some weaknesses like pawn on 5, but white has an isolated pawn on d4, so the position is like equal. The main continuation in this position is the move rook e1, e6, and here sometimes white played knight e5, but it is dangerous for them, like knight e5. Of course, takes e5 is bad due to knight e4, so bishop f4, knight fd7, bishop takes e5, knight takes 5, rook takes e5, and now comes the black's idea. They haven't already castled, so they can do is to play bishop d6, rook e1, castle queen side, and they have very strong attack on the g file. So the continuation knight e5 is bad for white, and the better move is c4, like in variation we have already seen. D takes c4, knight c3, and the white's idea is of course d5, so black has to play castle queen side and queen a4 with the idea knight b5 and queen takes c4. The black's best move of course is a6, and white now has a possibility of rook d1, but here come tactics, knight b4, knight e5, b5, and white has to sacrifice 2 pieces for a rook, knight b5, a takes b5, queen a8, queen b8, but the final position is of course better for black. The better move for white is bishop g5, pinning black's knight on f6, bishop e7, queen takes c4, and this is game Badnaruk Gira, Moscow 2010, and black had a better move. It is rook h8. White cannot play d5 for a moment, and black is going to start the counterplate on the g file. So let's move back to our main position, and let's analyze the variation C, knight to e2. Now black has to play bishop g4, or otherwise they will left with the bad bishop, f3. Of course, bishop f4 is nothing due to the possibility of queen f4, and comes to an endgame where of course black has slight advantage due to the chances on the minority attack. The other possibility for white is queen b3, but unfortunately we saw already that the c1 square is weak. Bishop e2, knight takes d4, queen takes d5, rook d8, bishop b5, knight takes b5, queen takes b5, rook d7, and the position is looking like the position from the Alapin variation from the Sicilian defense, and of course it is an equal position. Let's say bishop e3, a6, queen e4, knight f6, knight d2, e6. Black is completing their development, and black has no problems. So the main move in this position is f3, bishop d7, bishop f4, and if black plays something like queen d8, then e6, they have very bad position due to the bad bishop on d7. But of course e5, we saw such ideas already, and bishop g3 is a bad move due to bishop d6, and black already has slight advantage. So d takes e5, knight takes e5, and here white has a lot of possibilities. The first one is bishop takes 5, but this gives two bishops to black. The pair of bishop, of course, gives black a slight advantage. Queen takes e5, castles, king side, bishop d6, f4, queen e3, knight, king h1, knight f6, with a big advantage for black because white has problems with their king. The other possibility for white is bishop c2. It was played against me in one of the classical games, and I thought that move is interesting because black has to develop the knight on f6, but not on e7. Knight f6, castle king side, bishop d6. Now black wants to play queen b6, so knight, king h1 is a good move. However, I played h6 and I took the g5 square under control. Bishop b3, and unfortunately in the game I played bishop b5, and the game ended in a draw, but there was a good novelty, castle king side. Black is sacrificing the pawn, but bishop d5, rook a d8, and for the pawn, black has a good play on the d and e files. Let's say bishop b3, bishop b5, knight d2, knight h5, bishop e3, knight d3, and the black pieces is too active, and they will take the sacrifice pawn back with a big advantage. So the main move in this position is castle king side, bishop d6, and here of course white has many moves, but move gives black minimum equal chances. Let's start with king h1, prophylactics against queen b6, knight e7, knight e3, a6, knight c2, castle king side, knight e4, rook a c8. Of course, black has slight advantage. Let's talk about this position a little more. White played f2, f3, and the e3 square is weak. But white in the game played bad move, knight e3, and here tactics come. Knight takes d3, bishop takes d6, knight b2, the intermediate move, queen b3, queen d6, queen b2, b5 with a big advantage. Semenyuk, Dreyev, St. Petersburg, 1999. Black, of course, won this position easily. The other possibility for white is knight a3, a6, and c4. White is sacrificing the pawn, d takes c4, bishop takes c5, bishop takes c5, knight c4, and the most practical decision in this position is knight f6, knight e5, queen takes e5. Black has completed the development and of course has a good position. The other continuation for white is rook e1, knight e7, and in the game Burtasova-Korneev, Vladimir 2002, white played king h1, as it is already a mistake. Knight takes d3, bishop d6, knight f2, king g1, and knight h3, desperado knight, g takes h3, queen d6 with a big advantage for black due to bad white's pawn structure. So the main move in this position is knight d4, knight e7, continuing the development. Here, if white plays bishop c2, black can start the attack on the king side by playing f6, knight d2, g5, bishop g3, h5, bishop a4, and finally black castles, but they're making castle queenside, bishop d7, queen d7, and black has an advantage. So knight a3, a6, knight a8 to c2. Of course, black could also play here f6 with the same ideas we have already seen, but castle kingside is also a good move. In one game, white played rook e1, rook e8, bishop g3, f5, queen d2, f4, such non-standard pawn promotion, and the position is slightly better for black. Queen d2, so the other white opportunity. Rook f8, bishop g3, and here the game ended in two moves, queen b6, knight d3. It was a draw Tompa Yarosh 2006, but boy could play knight 7 c6, and here knight e3 is impossible due to knight d4 cd, knight takes d3, bishop d6, queen takes d6, queen d3, and bishop b5, and white fortunately loses in exchange, so they have to play rook f1, but queen b6, and I think that here black has slight advantage because white has a weak pawn on b2 and the weak square on e3. Now let's make a little conclusion on the chapter 1. The exchange variation of Caro-Kann defense looks like the Queen's Gambit with exchange colors, so white has one tempo up, but of course they must use this tempo very carefully, otherwise the possibility of minority attacks gives black slight advantage. From the rare continuation, I think that the interesting move is knight bd2, and the game transfers to the pawn structure like in the Irish variation of French defense, and the position is equal. In other rare lines, black is developing the bishop to g4, and they have a slight advantage. In the variation A, white plays bishop g5, and they prevent the move knight f6, but black doesn't want to see what white are playing, and they are doing the move knight f6 anyway, because like we see, the doubling pawns on the f file isn't bad for them at all. Then the black develops their bishop on g4 with an equal position. So the variation B, where white plays h3, I think that is the most solid continuations for white, because the black can't already develop the bishop on g4, and then black has to change their plan, and they are playing g6, and they are developing the bishop on f5. Then white has a little choice. They can change the bishops on d3 like Ponomarev did, and the position is equal, and they can change the bishop on f5, and the position is double-edged, and black has a good play on the g file, and the only thing that they must be ready to the white's pawn advance c3 c4. So let's talk about the variation C. Knight E2. It is the most frequently used variation in practice. But as we already seen that here black are fighting for the advantage because uh, white has weakness the square E3. So summing up everything, the exchange variation of the Caro-Kann defense isn't very popular nowadays because now black has solved all the opening problems and even has small chances on the advantage. Thank you for listening me for such a long time. If you like this video, please leave a like and see you next time.